Good evening, everyone. My name is Victor Robledo. I'm the director for Startup Grind Monterey Bay chapter. I'm here to introduce, it's a pleasure for me to introduce Edward Avila, the CEO and co-founder of the Manos Accelerator. He's been known as a change maker, a trailblazer, an entrepreneur. How you doing?
I'm doing well. So thanks for being here. Thanks for having me be at your event and also being with everybody here. Yeah, thanks for the kind words. There's other adjectives that have been described in the past, but not in those kind of words. But so thank you. It's a pleasure to be down here in Salinas.
Okay. So here's Startup Grind. We want to get to know you a little bit, right? What's your background? Parents? Where did you grow up?
Yeah, so I was born and raised in San Jose, downtown San Jose. I'm a child of a family of six. My mom's from Costa Rica. My dad's from Mexico. They came to this country late 50s, early 60s, and they fell in love, and outside of the country, set foot in San Jose, and my mom still lives in the same house that we were all born in, the old Victorian, just a few blocks away from downtown San Jose. I'm the middle child, so there's a span of 9 years, and I'm somewhere in between. So being close to downtown San Jose for me was a blessing. I joke around a lot, but that was really my backyard. I would skateboard, I would ride my bikes there, hang out in the old downtown, San Jose State. So I would wander a lot. And I did see, as I grew up, I had the pleasure of having various mentors throughout my life, both in very early grade school, high school, as well as my professional career. But I always been drawn to San Jose for obvious reasons. It was family, but also when I seen a lot of opportunity there, I had a chance to do something and give back. But I'm a product of the Jesuit education. Went to Bellarmine, went to Loyola Marymount for my undergrad, and also my master's from the University of San Francisco. 20 years in corporate as an executive coach, organization development. I've been a director of training and development programs. Also, I've ran staffing functions, both in the disk drive industry as well as semiconductors. And about 2005, I had an opportunity where many of the high potentials and top executives that I've been working with and work with their development as their coach, they were leaving corporate America, either because of during the downturn of the semiconductor division, but also they were just leaving corporate America to venture off and do their own startups. And many of them I actually started engaging with at Starbucks, Pete's, where they like, hey Ed, we're about to pitch to a VC, or hey Ed, we're needing some help. Can you coach us in presentation? And that's when I started getting more exposure outside of corporate, of folks with ideas, right? And watching them pitch and giving them advice, and some of them I actually I provided an investment. And then I had the bug, I started looking at, wow, if these guys could do it, I could do it. And I was looking for my own niche, my own startup, and I had an opportunity to do that about 4 years ago, as Facebook was wrapping up. So a couple of things. One, born and raised in San Jose, I think the entrepreneurship came later, but I feel like now I'm at a point where I could take a little bit of what I've been exposed to corporate plus entrepreneurship and kind of mend the two worlds together, and that's what I'm doing right now. I mean, I'm full of energy and I'm passionate about this. When most people at my age kind of like, okay, what's tailing off in their career, maybe slowing down. I find like there's this, a new chapter in my life, and it's really taken off.
So going back to high school, right? What are some of the traits that you picked up from your high school days that made you, right, that you carried through to your current entrepreneurship ventures? Were there any traits that you embody or that you took with you in the high school days?
You know, I was never, schooling for me, I probably spent more time in the hallways or in the principal office than I did in the classroom. You know, I was a wise guy, and if it wasn't for the nuns at St. Leo's or how I got into Bellarmine, I don't even know, because it's such a competitive and difficult school to get in, but I just got lucky.
Yeah.
And so I went in there not knowing what the school was about. If anything, it intimidated me. But I learned very quickly to stay in there, you have to have, it's competitive. And I think that competitive nature, that environment, it sucked me, right? I wasn't really competitive to begin with at that point, but it was, you know, I wanted to outdo somebody else in academics, or if it was in sports, and that carried on and going into college. But I think if anything, I was in that school, I just learned to ask questions. I was more an observer, because there wasn't a lot of Latinos in Bellarmine at the time. And there was a lot of, I think I could count from freshman to senior, maybe 10, you know, and maybe 2 of them were actually Filipinos, so that didn't count. So maybe 8, you know, you know, but if I was to look at that, it really led work ethic and studies. I started putting more focus on grades. I would put more focus on what I wanted to become. And at that point, I didn't know what I was going to do, you know, the next week. But all of a sudden, as I was getting out of sophomore year, I was already thinking college because everybody else was talking college. And for me, college was San Jose State. It was all San Jose, but I started seeing a whole different world. I started looking at, you know, Harvard, Stanford, and I ended up going to Loyola Marymount down in LA.
Wow. What was your first job after college?
You know, so so I graduated with a poli-sci degree.
Mm-hmm.
In my early years at Loyola, I started getting involved with the local politics. Mm-hmm. And there was a lady there by the name of Gloria Molina. She was the first county politician that actually ran a big election down in LA, and I was part of her election team. I walked precincts for her, and talk about a startup environment. Yeah. She was not in favor to win. She was the first Latina to actually run at the time, and just having that energy that was infectious and winning, you know, it was a calling where I wanted to do something in politics, local politics. So when I graduated, this was 91, so this is before the Clinton-Gore administration of hope and new beginnings. It was still with the Bush administration, which, you know, there was a war, there was the economics wasn't there yet, and so I graduated at a time where not a lot of people were hiring. So yeah. I wanted to do pretty much anything that would pay, and so my first real job was really an internship job for Ron Gonzalez, who eventually became the mayor of San Jose, but at the time he was a county supervisor. And I became the office intern, where I did anything from preparing briefs or doing research. This is pre-internet, mm-hmm. So a lot of it was going out and getting data and putting together data for Ron for his meetings and his agenda. And then that led to working out of the mayor's office. again as a council assistant, and I did that for another 6 months. And then back in '92, during a downturn, my first real job in high tech was a recruiter for a disk drive company. And I thought I was going to do that temporarily,
Right.
thinking I was going to go back to politics, but temporary ended up being 20 years later, and I still think it's temporary. But who knows? Maybe I'll become a politician, but you know, at this point, that was a path that I didn't take.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So along your path, right, leading up to the 20 years that you spent working professionally, you're learning, you're observing, right? And as a result of you observing, when was that moment when you actually felt, I want to be an entrepreneur, I want to, right?
Yeah, it's a good question. I worked in big companies, and every big company has a group, what they call either tiger teams or the emerging business group, or a group that they incubate ideas. And because of my way of thinking and just my way of practice, it was an environment that I thrived. It was something that they always gave it to Ed. Here's a new group, let Ed manage it. And because of those, the talent and the activities that they were working on, it was always a research environment. So even with a big company, you could actually still be innovative. And I had the opportunity to work with a lot of business leaders that had a team of 2 or 3, and they were looking to grow it to 15, 20, or from $0 in revenue to $20 million in revenue, and then it got absorbed into more of a commodity type business. But that was an area that I had the privilege and the opportunity to work in. And if you were to put me anywhere else, I would feel like I would rot. I need to work in an environment where every day is different.
Yeah.
Talent to me makes a difference in everything and anything. And that's what I take into what I'm doing right now with an accelerator. You could have a great idea, but it's the people behind it that I would put more weight on than anything else.
So the people, surrounding yourself with great people.
Great people, but smart people. And it doesn't not everybody has to be an MVP player. You know, everybody's looking for that Steve Jobs type or what have you. But a lot of guys are great visionaries, but you need visionaries that have doers that could implement that vision. If not, everybody has an idea, right? So I think that's why I love teams, right? Because you can have a makeup of a team starting with 3 people, and they all complement each other's skills. So from a recruiter standpoint, or even from a trainer or someone who does coaching, putting that right team, that chemistry, it takes luck sometimes, but that is the beauty of where you could put a team of 3 together. Nothing in front of them is impossible. You know, they don't see walls. And if you see an opportunity where they actually have a couple of cycle wins, then how do you keep that team intact to continue that? And every now and then, you'll see that one member of a team will leave because there's another opportunity, and then that magic goes away because you can't replace that core team. And so I saw that day in, day out into my 20 years in high tech.
So you're observing day in, day out that magic, whatever that secret sauce is, being involved with a team of individuals as opposed to just a single individual.
Yeah, you know, but I do believe that one person can make a difference. You know, I take the story of the LA Lakers, right? Before Phil Jackson shows up, you know, they had talent, and the talent just didn't gel. So they were lacking leadership. So I think it was Kirk Rambis. They removed Kirk Rambis, and Phil Jackson comes in the next year. I think they win the championship. He had the elements of the team there, but it was lacking focus. It was lacking vision, direction. And so sometimes you need that person with all of the elements of the team being there. But sometimes you may have that visionary, that person, but it's lacking the other elements. So that's why I think in a role that I had is you try to assess, you diagnose what you have, and you try to fill the gaps.
So where do you find these elements you do as an observer? Do you find them in other people or just through your path as you're intuitively trusting something that guides you in the right direction?
You know, it's all of the above. I mean, I see people that, you know, will look at stats, right? Okay, GPA, great school, worked here, worked there. But when they come in, okay, it was a bad hire. There is an element of intuition, you know, your gut feeling, you know, based on conversation, chemistry. And that's why I think hiring for talent takes an art. You know, you could have the right credentials, right statistics, the right references, but that's great to when the person comes in through the door, but spending the time to talk, to assess if it's a culture fit, it's a team fit, if it's something that's mutual. Because, you know, as I'm interviewing you, you're interviewing me, whether it's for a company or for an opportunity. And I think certain positions are so important because once we engage, it's almost like a marriage, right? I have to fulfill your needs, you have to fulfill mine for a purpose. And if we're misaligned, that's where divorces happen, right? That's where domestic violence and abuse happens. And a lot of, and things are so critical in Silicon Valley and whatever you're doing that I think sometimes people miss the mark. And sometimes intuition, gut feeling helps with those decisions sometimes.
So do you use that intuition in what you do now? I mean, the Manos Accelerator, that's amazing what you've been able to accomplish with those 7 companies, 5 of which female co-founders. Do you use that intuition on those teams as well?
Yeah, you know, so the Manos Accelerator, we had an opportunity to do something really unique, but at the same time as we were laying the groundwork for this program, we really didn't know who was going to apply, what talent was going to come forward to say, yeah, I want to be part of the program. And I talked to my other partners, David Lopez and Sylvia Flores. We said, you know, if 2 people apply, 2 teams, we'll take those 2 teams. Right? So we were blessed to have 75 teams apply for 7 to 10 slots.
Wow.
And when it came down to it, we had 12 good. We narrowed down the selection process from 75 to about 12 good ones. And from the 12, we couldn't rank them. You know, we just said, okay, let's just start talking to them. Let's invite them. And then for visa issues and timing issues, we ended up getting 7 commitments. And out of that 7, I would say they're all working on great solutions, which was a balance in which we wanted to do. But again, going back to that talent, the team focus, I would not have changed the 7 startups with any other alternates. I think things were meant for a reason. And I learned a lot from the 7 teams, as hopefully they learn a lot from the program itself. But, you know, we selected 7 individual teams in the very beginning. At the end, the beauty of these accelerators is that they all help one another. They all collaborate. And I was finding out that, you know, some of the teams were helping one another. And when we were looking at what makes a good team for Accelerator, we were careful of not selecting someone that just focusing on me. We wanted someone who could give and support. And so what we were looking at are teams that can teach and coach as well. And I think we had the dynamics of a good cohort by having that element, that trait, that they could teach others. So the teaching didn't just come one-sided. It was actually coming from them too.
How important is collaborating?
Here in Silicon Valley is very important. You know, I think one of the things that makes entrepreneurship Silicon Valley unique and special is that you have smart people working on solutions that they're trying to solve. You see very passionate people, but the collaboration that actually happens, I mean, I spent a lot of time at places like Starbucks, like places like Pete's and whatnot, just to talk and collaborate. Or I have an idea, what do you think about this? Or let me bounce something off you.
Yeah.
And I have strangers say, okay, sure, I'll meet with you. And at the end of it, we're spending, you know, an hour and a half, maybe sometimes 2 hours of just talking. And I always walk away in those sessions of, one, a network. I just met a great resource, a friend, and someone that I could collaborate in the future. But the idea that I had coming in magnified, right? Where it's like all of a sudden I'm getting feedback. Yes, Ed, this is great. Or, Ed, you're crazy. Have you thought about it this way? I was like, wow, I did it. You know, so I think there's a lot of individualism that takes place in our culture. But I think the beauty of our culture as well is just sharing those ideas. And I think those that get further along is someone who can be open to those ideas, to be open to criticism, but also as long as it's done in a very healthy manner, that it pushes that idea further. And I think Manos is a great example of that. I mean, it started out as me thinking of something, and then all of a sudden I'm collaborating, and then that Manos is something that it's no longer mine. I feel like it's this, other people are talking about it, it's impacting other people's lives. There's an interest in others to get involved. So what started as an idea, a dream, a concept, whatever you want to call it, is now something that it's alive. There's life that has been, what's the word? There's life in it. It's an organism. You know what I mean?
An organism. When you're creating this organism, is there ever a moment when you just felt alone, right, in this idea where nobody else understood what you were trying to do or were doing? You know, how did you deal with that?
You know, a lot of startups, ideas that are happening now as we speak in garages or in basements or depending on where you live. Having a sparring partner, a co-founder, someone who complements your skills is so important. You know, it's almost like you need someone who could complement and be your dynamic duo, your sidekick, or someone who, you know, there's Steve Jobs had Steve, you know, Woz, you know, and I think they made a good team.
Yeah.
It's important to get the idea out on paper, but to collaborate with someone if you really want to bring life into this idea. If you're going to continue to do it alone, you could. I know when I had Manos, before it was Manos, it was called something else. For 6 months, I wasn't getting traction. You know, you got to look at the accelerator, Manos Accelerator, as a startup. You know, and as soon as I started bringing others in, I saw all of a sudden that 6 months of frustration, not getting anywhere. All of a sudden, we were getting much traction. It was leading to other discussions, and it was fun seeing it grow. You know, it was all of a sudden that water that you're putting in, you started seeing, you know, life. You know, and it wasn't until I started letting go, and that's another thing is I see a lot of these ideas. Sometimes you get stubborn, and sometimes that stubbornness could be the cause of your failure. And as long as you started letting people in and started releasing the reins, you get further along. And I think at that point, once I was able to do that, I started seeing a lot more progress.
Oh, just letting go. Why the Manos name? What's the symbolism behind?
So originally the accelerator, I was going to call it Oi.
Oi.
Oi, you know, like now, you know. And I'll go back to my poli-sci.
Yeah.
I love history. I also wanted to do something a little bit more on the meaningful side.
Yeah.
And I remember I wrote this paper, it was a political science paper about Latinos, migrant workers coming into the valley, and they were coming here, and the only roles that they were able to find or do had to do with hands, whether it's construction, working in the fields, working in the back kitchen. And so as I was looking at Manos as the new generation, the next generation of Latinos in the creation process, I wanted to have something meaningful that never forget where they came from. And to me, Manos had a level of symbolism, but also not to forget the generation that was there before you. So that's how I came up with it.
Yeah.
And Latinos in the valley here, I think they would appreciate that story. But also, now that I see this new generation of Latino programmers, entrepreneurs, and whatnot, I mean, there's been a lot of work in the generations that were before us, and we can't lose sight of that, because that hard work has kind of put us in the position where it put us in good schools,
Yeah.
has put us in opportunities where we're benefiting from. And I think those hands that help us get there should never be forgotten.
Wow. How important is it for you to mentor the next generation of up-and-coming entrepreneurs?
You know, I benefited from Silicon Valley as an individual, as a professional, as a man. You know, I got lucky to go to the right schools, to be mentored by great teachers, and just as I broke into high tech, just people kind of taking me under their wing. And so I could have been selfish and say, you know, I ended up getting a great salary. I live in a great neighborhood. I have savings to put my son to good schools, and that's it. Okay, I got the ticket, punch it, and I could coast, right?
Yeah.
But looking at what I've seen and benefited from Silicon Valley, I also seen that there's certain waves of groups that have come into this valley and has benefited as well. And I think for me, you know, as I look in this area, there's no shortage of Latinos. And I feel that we have been looking at this whole thing that's happening, this magic. We were talking earlier, you said the secret sauce of Silicon Valley. You know, there is something there, and I think Silicon Valley has created a network, a fraternity, if you will, of individuals that know how to work the valley to benefit themselves. And I think Latinos in general don't understand that. We've been sitting in the sidelines, not because we don't have the desire to work hard or the desire to win. We do. I just think we just don't know how to play that game. And so for me, I wanted to do something where I benefited from it. I've seen a lot of business leaders doing well. I've seen entrepreneurs doing well. And I want to be able to say, okay, my son who's 12 years old, if he continues his path, I want him to say, hey, Daddy, I have an idea, and I'm going to start a startup. I don't want to say, Mijo, no, you can't do it because it's not you, or we don't do that. No, I want him to say, I could do it, and we're the group's advisors, mentors that's going to help me. And I want to be able to create that platform, that program, to be able to say, you know what, if you have an idea, here's a program, or call this number, or here's a group that can help you. And I don't want to wait for somebody else to do it. I feel that I have been blessed. I benefited from it. Why wait? If someone's going to do it, why not me? If someone's going to do it, why can't I rally a group of people that be able to establish that and do it right in the middle of Silicon Valley? And that's how Manos has come. And I've had some great partners that said, Ed, I believe in your vision. You're a little crazy, but we support this. And that's been Google for Entrepreneurs, Brightstar, Nissan, Novak. These are the early adopters that came forth and supported me with this, and hopefully there's more.
Yeah. So what's next for you? What's your overall vision?
So last year for us, as we closed out last year, we wanted to do something before the end of the year with our first program. I would say that's just the beginning. We have an aggressive roadmap for 2014, and again next year in 2015. But I think just having one is not enough for me. I want to close out the year by having over 20 startups that have gone through a program. I want to see these startups funded. I want to see these startups in media. I want to see stories written about them. I want to see role models generated that would inspire newcomers coming in. Because Silicon Valley and this whole entrepreneurship, this is a great time to be in it. I mean, innovation does not stop, right? I mean, there's solutions being thought in various markets, whether it's healthcare, education, civic, consumer. It's always evolving, right? And how we do things as individuals is changing. I mean, we're so addicted to smartphones, now, and before it was the pager and the phone, God knows what's going to be next. Next form of technology, but to be part of that, right, is great. So for me, my vision is to create an international hub in Silicon Valley that attracts the brightest and greatest as far as Latinos across the U.S. as well as Latin America. Maybe we look at creating a Manos chapter in Miami or, Costa Rica or something. I don't know. But to me, I want to do something in San Jose. San Jose, for me, is kind of like the forgotten city of Silicon Valley. I don't know how it happened 15 years ago, but before it used to be San Jose, Sunnyvale, Mountain View, and now it's viewed as San Francisco, Emeryville, and San Jose is kind of like, depending on where you're at. So when they say South Bay, it ends in Mountain View. Francisco, I think you know that. So I want to bring that magic back. With Manos, I want to be able to create what Mountain View and Castistry has been able to do over the years, and create more startups to bring in business, job creation, and ultimately wealth. And I want to see that within the Latino community. And I think we have an opportunity to just do that. So I have different goals with what I want to do with Manos, but for now is to be work on the accelerator, bring in more mentors, and graduate great programs that would be funded. So let's see how we do with that.
I think now we're going to go ahead and open it for questions. But thank you so much for coming here. And is there any questions? I have a question. If you can think back on a specific moment in your life when you thought, I'm either going to do this or right? That moment in your life where you thought, this is the road that I'm going to take. I'm all in. What would that moment be for you, and why would that resonate with you?
You know, from 18 to about 25, and I'm not sure how it is these days, but those were the years where you're always looking for someone to tell you what to do. In college, you had an advisor. Okay, here this semester you take these classes. Okay, next semester you take these classes. When I graduated, it was more, okay, you do this, you may get promoted, or you do this, you get an incentive. It wasn't until I was 25 where I said, you know what, school's over. I'm going to cut the cord. I've learned already what I thought, what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
And that's where I started to take roles that were outside of the area. I lived in LA for school, but I came back up here. I had an opportunity to live in Irvine. There was a role there. Sure, I'll take it. I had an opportunity to work for a disk drive company in Boulder. I never went to Colorado before.
Yeah.
I took a role there, and I learned a lot just doing that. And I think for me, sometimes you learn from different cultures, from different environments, that helps you learn how to do things. It challenges you. It takes you out of your comfort zone. My family's here. I could have easily stayed in San Jose, be safe here, but being in Boulder, Colorado, for me, is I didn't know anyone. It was cold, no family members, and starting all over was really a challenge. That I think, as I all of a sudden said, you know what, forget the schooling. I'm going to do what I wanted to do, and let's see how that takes me. I started to appreciate the mentors, the people that helped me there, but then I started doing more to help others. So I started getting involved with schools, started mentoring the younger generation. But the thing that came to answer your question, I had to remove myself from my comfort and really think things that didn't come at me easily. And so I had an opportunity to take a role in semiconductors, where semiconductors is not sexy. There's nothing attractive about semiconductors, and that opportunity led me to travel to India, to Beijing, to Germany, and I was 25, 26 years old, and here I am traveling and working within this company where sometimes I was the youngest guy in the room. But I think that's where I learned how to speak up, learn to share my ideas, my thoughts, how I challenge others, and I think sometimes Latinos, I'll speak for myself because I do see this quite, and I'm generalizing here, but we don't speak up enough. I think when I was 25, 26 years old, I was challenging people's thoughts, the status quo. And at times, I think that branded me as a maverick, a troublemaker, an a-hole sometimes. But I learned, I learned from people that challenged me, and I was challenging others. But more importantly, it was just challenging how I thought through things. And I'm a very methodical person, but I needed that desire, or I had that desire to always learn. And I think when I see my son and I now preach to him, God, I feel like a dad, or I feel like I hear my mom. It's like, but I think hopefully he will appreciate that, because someday I'm not going to be there.
Yeah.
And hopefully all of those learnings, those teachings, he's going to archive it, and it's going to come out, and he's going to recognize, wow, here's an opportunity. Something came up at it. What do I do? Well, hopefully that little voice in his head is me, and I'm there. And so I had many mentors and coaches, but it wasn't until I was 25, 26 years old where I started saying, you know what, it's enough observing, being coach. I got to jump in and make my own mark. And to me, that was the year where it happened for me.
Wow. Thank you. Thank you for that. Any other questions?
Yeah, Francisco.
Talking to you here. So I have two questions. The first one is, during all of this, did you have any support from your parents, or did they think you were crazy, or did they totally support what you were doing? Because as a Latino, sometimes it's if one generation has been, like you said, working with their hands their entire lives, and then I guess they see you doing something completely different. How was that taken? And then the second one is, I totally agree. There is not enough Latinos out there. You go to Menlo Park, and you go to Palo Alto, and you go to Redwood City. And me growing up, it was a totally different Silicon Valley than whatever else sees. I have family members in East Menlo Park, East Palo Alto, and Marsh Road on Redwood City, and so totally different. Growing up, totally different conception of what those cities were like. When do you think is the time to target Latinos growing up and encourage them or let them know that you can actually make it, or at least have an opportunity in Silicon Valley. It's not just us over here and them over there.
Yeah, it's two good questions. I'm going to answer, and hopefully I don't forget the second one, so I may have to ask you to repeat that. So the first one, I mentioned family of 6 kids. I have 2 brothers and 3 sisters. We were the reverse of the Brady Bunch, so it was girl, boy, girl, boy. So I was Jan, I guess. So my parents divorced when I was 5. So my dad, he's a cobbler. He still has his shop in Palo Alto, what used to be Town and Country Village. He's had a shop there since '72. My mom, single parent. She probably until, she always had like 2 or 3 jobs. So I never really saw my mom, to be honest with you. I mean, we were raised by my grandmother. When my mom came home, it was mediating the fights, this person, mommy, so we always caught her as a short-tempered, now I look back as like, wow, we were horrible, and so I've learned to appreciate my mom probably more now than ever before. When before I was like, she wasn't around, she didn't go to my events, she didn't take me to the social events, she wasn't at my games. She couldn't, right? Yeah. She was looking to survive and try to bring in, salary to put food on our table. So we learned to, growing up, my brothers and sisters, we supported ourselves, and to an extent. We took care of ourselves. My younger brother, he's probably my best friend. My older brother, I just spoke to him just driving over here. We have a lot. We're different, but we also support one another. My younger brother, he's a lawyer for a startup. My older brother's a general counselor or a general contractor. My sister is a nurse. I have another sister who works for the police department, and then I have another sister that works for the education and UCSD. All different, but you get us in one room, we always talk about the stories growing up. And so my biggest support, aside from my wife and my immediate family, comes from my family, and they're also the biggest critiquers, right? Biggest critics. So Facebook is great because we have our own little family page, and we all share and whatnot. But when stories are written, they're like, okay, Ed, this is great, or hey, what are you guys going to do next? So they're always pushing. And my mom, you know, now that she's retired, she's enjoying life a lot more. She knows what I'm doing. You were there at the kickoff. You know, she stood up. People surrounded her, right? I mean, it was really great to see she's proud, I guess. But the fact that something's happening now with Latinos in Silicon Valley in this space is really important for her. So I think it's really important to get the support, but if it's not there, it shouldn't be a barrier. I got a lot of support from teachers, Jesuits from Bellarmine, mentors that just kind of been in my path. And I just learned to ask questions. To me, adults were not only people that guided you, but also was a wealth of knowledge. I mean, I wasn't afraid to talk to teachers and administrators, even at 14, even at maybe at 12, because I spent more time at principal's office. But nevertheless, I learned how to engage, and I think that's really important. So that's your first question. Second question, what was that again?
Short version is when do you think is the best time to encourage Latinos?
So for me, I wish I had role models very early. You know, I do quite a bit of work in the college ranks. Even before Manos, I was involved with Career Center, where I was a mentor for a mentee. I think we need more leaders, more domain experts at a professional level to recognize if they're 5 or 6 years out, you don't have to wait till you're 40 plus to start engaging in a new generation. You could be a role model, or just being there to volunteer your time, to help guide. And I think today's social network tools makes it easier to engage, both from someone who's coming out of school or in school or early in their careers to network. You know, with LinkedIn, I really don't decline anyone that wants to reach out to me, you know, but I always follow up to say, hey, thanks for reaching out. How can I help you? And a lot of them is, hey, can we meet? I think, to me, time has become a valuable resource that I wish I had more time. But I think if someone would have reached out, if I had an early version of Ed, I wish more people would have said, how can I help you? Because I think I would have started this earlier or done something else. But I think I'm in a position now that if somebody asks me how, you know, I need your help, well, Victor, I think you reached out to me, and we started talking.
Yeah.
If I have an opportunity to do that, whether it's in the moment or a scheduled time, I will maximize it as much as I can. But I also will tell them, you know, now that we share time, you know, follow up on what we're saying, or hopefully when they get to a point where they could add value to somebody else, that they remember this conversation. So when Victor, when you make it big, you know, hopefully, you know, you're at a point where somebody reaches out to you, you spend that time talking to that person.
Definitely. I definitely appreciate you taking the time to sit down with us. You know. Is there any other questions?
Victor and I were talking earlier about how interesting it is. We're so close to Silicon Valley, and there's so much awesome energy going on up there. I grew up in Hollister. Victor grew up in Salinas, and both of these communities are sort of bedroom communities for Silicon Valley. So we're wondering, how can we create or encourage energy here, so maybe people don't have to drive up to Silicon Valley so much, but maybe we'll be competing with Silicon Valley someday.
Or Silicon Valley expands to engulf Salinas. Right? You know, and Victor and I were talking earlier about this, where places, people, they try to emulate and try to copy what Silicon Valley is doing. And I struggle with that. I really do, because when I was in corporate, we were setting up design centers across the U.S., whether it's in Raleigh, RTP, Austin, Seattle, Fort Collins, and sometimes they always said, okay, we want to be in the next Silicon Valley. And sometimes you just gotta, you know, stop the nonsense. What is your location? What's your environment known for? What are the resources? And how do you rally the resources together, the people, the influencers, together to work at a certain cause, whether it's entrepreneurship or maybe something else. I don't know. But I think you have to recognize, what is Hollister, Salinas, Monterey is known for? Who are the influencers, domain experts that you could rally, and then figure out what makes sense for this environment. You know, Techstars was able to do this at Boulder with David Cohen and Brad Field, where they have their own unique culture. You know, Seattle has been able to do that, where they don't necessarily have to come to Silicon Valley. People either are drawn by that energy, what's happening there. And so Silicon Valley is a playbook, but I don't think you can ever emulate it or try to replicate it in this environment. I think you have to recognize what you guys are known for, what is it that makes you guys special, and figure it out and see what makes sense for you guys, and maybe it's something completely different and unique. But if you're trying to chase Silicon Valley, it's always evolving. I don't think you could, it's like grabbing the tiger by the tail. It's hard to tame, and I think people have tried it. I don't think you do it.
Any other questions? All right. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you coming down from San Jose to Monterey Bay, and we look forward to seeing you again and talking to you some more.
Oh, thank you. And you know, you guys what you're doing here, Victor, is great. Hopefully, you know, come back in 6 months and see how this has really been able to evolve and grow.
Yeah.
And I'm really glad you invited me and being part of this journey of yours. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's give him a round of applause. Thank you.